This thing. What's up, Melanated family? This is your boy Harrison, bringing you a brand new episode of the Melanated Convo podcast. I want to welcome everybody to the show today. Let's go ahead and get everything started. Today, we're going to have a good discussion. Me and my brother Jermaine Morris, he's going to come back on the show. He was on the show last week. He is going to come back on the show. We are going to discuss the Bill Cosby situation and what has been revealed about the situation so far. And really just just a glimpse into what Black society can learn from this brother, right? What can we learn from this situation? Now, it's still early. Let me see something here. Let me hold on one second, you guys. It's still early, so other things can come out about him being released and in other charges that may be brought up, because we know how these people can do shit at times. But me and my brother is going to just talk about what this means for our community, because, you had a lot of conversation about this. You had a lot of people who felt, since it was so many women that accused him, that he must have been guilty. You know what I mean? Some people were going to feel that this doesn't necessarily vindicate him because supposedly he was released on some sort of glitch or something like that. So we're going to get into it. Let's see here. Hold on one second. Okay, let my brother know I just sent him an email so we can get back to it. Also, if you're listening to this on one of the digital platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Overcast, any of these things, please leave a comment on the show. Remarks and reviews of the show does something positively to the algorithm. So please do that if you can. If you're watching it on YouTube, if you're watching it on Facebook, please hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't done so already. I'm doing this on StreamYard for the first time, family. I'm doing this on StreamYard for the first time, so bear with me. I'm going to just do a real check here to see how everything is looking on the other platforms that is being live on right now. Also, what we're going to do today, the topic will be around Bill Cosby. The topic will be around Bill Cosby. That's the news story as well, basically. So me and my brother's going to get into that. We also going to talk about the Black businesses as well. As you know, here on the Melanated Convo podcast, something else that we do here that's extremely important to me personally is we talk about Black businesses. We have a Black business spotlight where we highlight different businesses around the country. Sometimes we highlight local businesses. Sometimes they're from everywhere. Today, we're going to focus on a couple of local businesses. Today, we're going to focus on a couple of businesses that are actually, my family business and my business. You know what I mean? So we're going to get into a little bit of that. So for the Black, so again, like, subscribe to the Melanated Convo podcast on iTunes, all the digital platforms. You're watching it on YouTube, please subscribe or follow the Melanated Fathers TV Facebook page. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to the Melanated Fathers TV YouTube page as well, so you can be updated when we drop new shows and things of that nature, right? So for the Black business spotlight today, the businesses that we're going to talk about, like I said, my family businesses. The first business, my family owns a funeral home called Thompson Rose Chapel Funeral Home here in the Sacramento area. This is a family-owned funeral home. This is a family-owned funeral home. This is a business that's been in the Sacramento area since the 50s. My family has been lucky to acquire the business maybe 4 years ago. So this is a funeral home that serves the Black community here. Well, all people, but it is considered a Black funeral home because that's most of the guests or most of the customers rather are African-American people or melanated people. But, business is supposed to be a business. So you're going to accept anyone, you know what I mean? You're not going to discriminate based on how someone looks, but we are considered a Black funeral home. So at this funeral home, of course, you can do full services, you can do cremations, you can do memorial services, just a different array of options available if you're just looking to cremate your loved ones. Sometimes we're not keen on talking about death in our community. We like to shy away from death. We like to shy away from what is going to be the inevitable for all of us. You know what I mean? Let me bring my brother Jermaine on right now. What's up, brother? Can you hear me?
Inevitable for all of us. You know what I mean?
Let me bring my brother Jermaine on here. Can you hear me? Can you hear me talking? No?
Yes, I can. Yeah, I can hear you now.
I can't hear you. Okay, hold on one second.
Can you hear me?
Excuse me, boss. You have
it. You're muted.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
All right, good stuff. I was trying out this little boom mic that I got. I think I'm gonna try to hook it up a little bit later.
Oh, okay, no problem.
But once I plugged it in, I couldn't hear you. All right, what's up, my brother?
Man, how you doing today?
Hey, man, ain't nothing. I was like, you know what? That's something timely to talk about. You know what I mean? It happened today, and of course, I have a lot of opinions about it. You know what I mean?
Man.
All right, so like I was doing, Jermaine, just real quick, I want to continue with the Black Business Spotlight. First business, like I was talking about, is Thompson Rose Chapel Funeral Home. As much as I do the Black Business Spotlight, I rarely talk about my family business. I'll be so focused on other people sometimes. So like I was saying, Thompson Rose Chapel Funeral Home family, if you guys are in the Sacramento area, like I said, I speak about businesses that are local, sometimes businesses that are around the country. Today, we're talking about two local businesses. Both of them are mine, or I'm associated with both of them. So the first, like I said, is Thompson Rose Chapel Funeral Home here in the Sacramento area. Cremations, full services, memorial services, really reasonable prices. I mentioned earlier that we are a Black funeral home. That's just based on the clientele at this point. But of course, we serve everyone. You know what I mean? It's a business that'll be happy to help anyone with their loved one. And like I was telling them, Jermaine, many of us don't like talking about death. We don't like talking about, our timely demise or whatever. But it's always important to, if let's say you don't have a family member that's sick or need our services right now, ask yourself, do you have life insurance?
Exactly.
How much life insurance do you have? Are you planning on taking care of people when you die, or you just want to get enough to make sure you taken care of? You know what I mean? So these are important conversations because, my wife has been in this business for 20 some odd years. I am fairly new to this type of business structure. But one of the biggest things that we see is people, when there's a room available where they sit and talk about the particulars of what the family member may want, what the final steps will be. And in that room, the biggest conversation or the most frustrating conversations that the family members have is always pertaining to money.
Yeah.
It's always pertaining to who's going to pay what. This is a revealer of saying something, because I can't speak to other communities as far as this is concerned. I've only seen this when it's us in particular. So I'm listening in and I'm just getting perspective. And sometimes for some people in your family, it's a revealer of how well they're doing or not doing. Because if they had the money and they love the person, they're going to say, forget the money, take what you need. This is my auntie, my mama, my cousin. I just want to help. But sometimes if, you're an adult or elder or someone like that in your family, and they come to you in these moments and ask for money, or you realize you don't have it, sometimes if you have a certain mentality, that'll bring out frustration. And now you want to fight, and now you want to cuss. And a lot of it is just because this shed a light on how well you may not be doing in life. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So Thompson Rose Chapel Funeral Home, even if you want to do pre-planning, let's say you're someone who you're not thinking about your death like that, but you say, you know what, I have life insurance, but I also want to pre-plan directly with the funeral home. This is always a possibility as well. Also, we have people, the guy who helped me get my life insurance, because I've only had life insurance for like 4 years. So I was just like everybody else. I'm not going to front like I've been having it figured out. You know what I mean? But I feel better now just knowing that my kids are going to have a legway and they'll have resources to get in my house, or I don't know, whatever the hell they want to do with their money.
Huge
but
difference.
You may know what I mean? So that's important. So even if you don't know anyone, go to our website, leave us a message, call the number on the website here. I'll pull the website up right now because I got this little new technology. You know what I mean? I just show it. You know what I mean? But go to the website, contact us some way. We have people who do life insurance. You know what I mean? We have people do life insurance. You may know somebody that does life insurance. You may be on the internet and see somebody going up and down a timeline talking about they offer life insurance. And because of whatever's going on in your life or your mental at that time, you may not even see it as something that's important. But family, let me tell you, get on that. Get on that. We know that in America, you know, real estate is one of the signifiers of how resourceful your family will be. Most resources in a regular family is generated by real estate, unless they own business and things like that. Another thing you can do to help is the life insurance piece. You know what I mean? So you can just be at ease. So if something does happen, you guys can just plan. You guys can just, because people are grieving as it is. So to mix your grieving with financial complications can really stress you out even more. So Thompson Rose Chapel Funeral Home, go to the website, thompsonrosechapel.com. On the website, not only will you find a lot of our information, but you'll find resources there as well. So if you just lost someone or you've been dealing with a family member that hasn't been here for a while, whatever the case may be, there's questions that or there's information on there about that. If you want to pre-plan, there's information on there about that. If you're dealing with difficulties in your family from someone passing and finances not being right or old wounds being brought back up, there's resources about all of these things on the website. Again, that's Thompson Rose Chapel, thompsonrosechapel.com. I know we don't like thinking about these things, but it's important that we do plan for the future. Next business. Hold on one second. Let me take this one off. Next business will be my business, Antelope Mobile Notary Services. Again, this is a local business. I'm sorry if you're not in the Sacramento area. You know, this doesn't necessarily pertain to you, but maybe you can start a business like this yourself. You know, maybe this can inspire you to want to do something like that on your own. So I have Antelope Mobile Notary Services, where I offer notary services in the Sacramento area and all the surrounding areas. Power of attorney, affidavits, healthcare directives. You have a kid that's traveling to a different country. You need to get those things notarized, adoption papers notarized when you're refinancing your mortgage or taking money out on your mortgage. A lot of these type of documents need notarization. So give us a call, 916-545-0950. I cover the entire Sacramento area. I probably have the lowest prices in Sacramento. I have some discounts available if you go to my Google page. If you Google Antelope Mobile Notary Services, I have 15% off for everybody in the Antelope area right now. You know, that'll change. I think August 31st, we'll switch it to different parts of Sacramento, but it's a very needed service. So if you have legal documents in the Sacramento area and you don't want to travel, you want the convenience, because that's really what it's about. If you want the convenience of being able to have someone come to your home, facilitate this for you, give us a call. Again, that's Antelope Mobile Notary Services, local business, 916-545-0950. So that's it for the Black Business Spotlight. Again, if you're listening to this on one of the digital platforms, Overcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, all these places you can find the Melanated Convo podcast. Please leave a review. The review positively affects the algorithms so they see it, brother. You know what I mean? Because we want as many people possible listening. That's what we're doing it for. If you're listening to it on, because I'm streaming live right now on the Melanated Fathers TV Facebook page, please follow that page. Follow everything that we're doing. If you're listening to it or watching on the Melanated Fathers TV YouTube page, like the page, subscribe to the page, man. So let's get everything going. I got my brother Jermaine Morris here. Man. Like I said, I want to bring him on. Well, he wanted to bring me on. He wanted to have this conversation because the Bill Cosby topic was really heavy in our community. Everybody had so much to say, whether you liked the brother, whether you thought he did nothing wrong, whether you thought all of those women were correct. This is just very interesting, right? Yeah. So what were your first thoughts, Jermaine, when you seen that he was released?
I wasn't surprised.
Mhm.
Like, I mean, it was surprising by way of I didn't expect to see that on my timeline today.
Mhm.
But when I saw the reason why he was released, I was kind of like, okay, all right, makes sense.
Yep.
I didn't think he was going to do the full term anyway. I know everybody was talking about him. Just ended up serving. He was probably going to serve 3 years, and then they was going to release him. Anyway, it was what I heard. It was hearing a lot of talk since he's been in there. So when I heard, he was like, I was funny. I actually went through. I was on Instagram, and Felicia Rashad, Claire Huxtable, she was the one that posted, that justice has been served, like that he's out. And I was like, oh, wait a minute, what? And it's like, oh yeah, Bill Cosby. I call him Slick Willie from Philly, and so yeah, I call him Slick Willie from Philly, and I saw he was out. I was like, okay, I can see it. And then when they had the breakdown of why he was being released, I would think that it's important to preface something. There's a difference between what's legal and what's right. And so I say that because for the reason of what's legal, he shouldn't have been in there. So regardless of, and the reason why is the same reason why they let him out. Like, and if people don't know, there was two major factors, but the number one, the defining one, was that deposition he gave. I believe it was 2002 or 2005, where in the stipulations for giving the deposition, it was that anything that I say in this deposition cannot be used against me criminally at any point in time.
And when he was prosecuted, they tried to use.
Well, they did use it.
They did use that against him. Got it.
And so when prosecution used that information, it was information that shouldn't have been admissible. And when they used that information to get the conviction, they screwed themselves because the information in the deposition became public. So you can't even retry him because the public became made aware of the information. You're never going to find an impartial jury based upon the information from that deposition. So you have to let him go.
Okay, real quick, everybody who's just tuning in, if you don't know or you've been living under a rock, Bill Cosby was released today. Jermaine is releasing the legalities behind why he was actually released. Go ahead, Jermaine.
Yeah, so that the information about him drugging women in that deposition was the primary basis for establishing an MO about what he had allegedly done later on in life. And so, with none of that information being admissible, that's a game changer in their case. And like I said, he only gave the deposition under the strict premise that I can't be prosecuted for this criminally later. So when they kicked this case up to the Supreme Court, they're like, yeah, if y'all didn't want to be able to use it, you should have never made the deal with him. That's the premise in the law. If when they got him in that deposition and they made that stipulation that whatever you say, we can't come for you with this later, that's on the state. And that's the mistake that the state made. Okay. So if you're making the argument between what's right and what's legal, there are people who are celebrating, oh, well, he's free. He's this. I told you it was lies. I told you he wasn't found innocent of any charges. It's just saying the information that was used to present the case in the first place was invalid. So if he did or didn't do it, that didn't change from yesterday to today.
Got it.
It's and why I stress why that's important, but why we should pay attention to the law. There's been a couple of examples. So we're in Northern California, because I know people listen to all these things everywhere. And you may remember the Lacey Peterson case. And Lacey Peterson was a woman who was allegedly murdered by her husband when she was pregnant, Scott Peterson. So by the law, Scott Peterson is going to be in prison for the rest of his life. If you're going off of what's right and what's law, legally, Scott Peterson should not be in prison right now.
Wait, why do you say that?
Because there were no eyewitnesses. There was no murder weapon. There was no physical evidence that ties him to murdering her. The closest thing that they got is that they can place him at the scene of the dock where they believe her body was initially dumped in the water. That's the closest. So, I mean, by best case scenario, you can say he was involved.
Got it.
But they didn't find claw marks on him and her skin, his skin under her nails. There's no physical evidence that ties him to the murder.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why he was convicted is because he was cheating on his 8-month pregnant wife with the young girl that he was telling about he was going to leave his wife for.
Mm-hmm.
And in public opinion, he was a POS. And that was the major condition of why he was found guilty. But if you go by the law, nobody saw him do it. There was no murder weapon to show what it was used. Nobody saw them dragging a body. There was nothing. The best case, they just have him that he was at the scene at some point in time. Realistically, it could have been like a Ray Caruso situation. He could have paid somebody to do it. It could have been AC and OJ. He could have just been a second man. He could have whatever. But they don't have him pinned for actually killing her. But he's in prison for the rest of his life. So there's cases where you look at, well, did he do it? Probably. But when you're looking at what's right and what's legal, legally he should not have been there. Legally, Bill Cosby should be home. Based upon the law, and this is a nation of laws, the black and white, the dotted line, the fine print, they did not have their ducks in a row to get that conviction. So I think that for us, I would love to see where we go with it. If we see this as a win, because we saw OJ as a win.
We did. I did personally.
Yeah, we saw OJ as a win. And OJ is the same case to the Scott Peterson. No, there's no eyewitness. There's no murder weapon. There's no physical evidence. Well, there's actually some physical evidence that put OJ at the scene with the blood and the glove. There's more evidence for OJ than Scott Peterson. But law, what's right and what's legal. And the question that I would pose, like within our community, is, are we going to be on team same energy when it comes to Robert Sylvester Kelly?
Okay, explain to everybody who that is, Jermaine.
That's R. Kelly.
Sylvester, you threw in the middle name. I was like,
yeah, Robert Sylvester Kelly. Are we going to keep the same energy? Because R. Kelly is sitting in jail right now. He hasn't gone to court. COVID backed all the courts up across the country. He's been sitting in jail for a year. R. Kelly's faced like 10 counts of state crimes for aggravated assault, similar to Cosby. And he's faced with 18 federal counts for everything from obstruction of justice to child pornography, a bunch of stuff, which sounds like a lot. But in reality, the minimum for his state time is 15 years, and the minimum for his federal is 10. And a judge's discretion is if those sentences can run concurrently or if they run consecutively, meaning the difference between you do 10, then you do 15. Or if while you're doing 15, your 10 counts, you're doing your 10 and your 15 at the same time. That's a judge's discretion.
Got it.
So R. Kelly is still a year out from trial and from conviction, if it happens, and sentencing. If that goes through and he gets the minimum, he'll have to do the whole 10 if he gets the federal. But I believe in Illinois, I think it's like 80% you got to do for state. And 80% of 15 years is 12. Well, by the time he's done, he'll have already done 2 in jail waiting, which means if he's convicted on state and federal as a minimum, R. Kelly can be home 10 years after conviction. That's legal. Do we say that's right?
Now, on your first point, as far as how our community is going to view the Bill Cosby situation, I don't think many people, some will, but I don't think many will dig into it the way that you have. I think many will see, because the first thing I saw, even after seeing the legality of it, I was happy for the brother that he was home, because I'm of the belief that 30 years ago, Bill Cosby may have used the drugs of the time to do certain things to women. Should he be convicted at this point in his life? Was it as many women that came forward? See, I have too many questions about this situation to fully condemn him. You know what I mean? Because at the same time, I understand that when Bill Cosby was, he's had some choice words for the Black community. He said some right things in the wrong way, which made me look at him a little weird. You know what I mean? So I thought, looking at everything that he's going through now, to me, a part of what we're seeing in his situation is like a systematic push to put him in his place for some reason. You know what I mean? I think it's well known that he tried to buy NBC, and there's all these different things that power moves he's tried to make in this world to give himself some leverage. I don't know if any of that has something to do with this, but in my opinion, when you see, because many people would tell me, well, if you see 30 women, he must have did something.
Yeah.
Bullshit. I personally don't believe that. I think lawyers are good at their job and they can go find people that they need to facilitate whatever that purpose may be. And that could have been a lot of what was happening to him. And you know, with America, it's so weird for me because, like I was saying about the COVID-19 shit and the vaccines and everything, I want to just take what they say on face value and cut on the news, and that happened, and that's real, and begin to gain perspective by what I'm watching or by what I'm watching. But too often in the news, too often in our society, everybody has a goddamn agenda. Yeah. So it's difficult for me to trust the country in that manner. So I think Bill Cosby has done some things wrong. And I think we have a system that kind of makes money and kind of enjoys seeing people in general in a certain position, but especially black men in a certain position when this is supposed to be America's dad. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I still feel for the brother, and I hope, because he's 80-something years old, so we don't know how much longer the brother got here on earth with us. But I hope when he comes out of this situation, he's more understanding of, regardless of who you are in black society, the amount of money you have, what you've done for this country, none of that shit matters, in my opinion, when they want to come and get you. And he's a prime example of that. Now, with the R. Kelly situation, like you were saying, what's legal and what's right. Yeah. Many people may not like my take on the R. Kelly situation, but I personally don't think the brother should do life in jail or any. I think R. Kelly is sick. He was molested. He molested kids to a degree. He should get time in jail, and he should get a lot of goddamn counseling. That's what I think. And this is my clause for the R. Kelly situation.
Okay.
The only way he can get time is if any parent of a young girl who was under 18, if they get jail time too, then I'm for it. Everybody accountable, because we're talking about minors. He didn't kidnap girls and bring them somewhere, and they found them beaten and dead and raped them.
They were chauffeured to the house. They were dropped.
Parents willingly offered up their young female daughters for the possibility of some type of payoff. Your ass gotta pay too. Okay. I don't want probation or fine. No, you got to go sit in jail too. If you don't want to go sit in jail, then you got to throw out the case against this man, and he needs help. Should he be just let back into society to pee on young girls? Hell no. You know what I mean? The man got some problems mentally, but again, in this society, black men in particular, it seems like when they get an opportunity to hang us, they take it, and the court of public opinion holds too much bearing on what actually happens. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because so if you take R. Kelly, as opposed to Bill Cosby, has not been convicted of anything.
Mm-hmm, true.
R. Kelly's been sitting in jail for a year waiting for his trial. Mm-hmm. You know, so knowing he's not a convicted anything at this point when it comes to the accusations. Now, I am a believer that where there's smoke, there's fire. So I get one-offs, i.e. the late Kobe Bryant, one-offs, even i.e. rest in peace Tupac, or even Mike Tyson, where you take an incident which may or may not happen, we'll just say for the sake of argument, but you never heard another case similar to it about that individual before or after for the rest of their life. That's important.
That says something.
That's important. You can make the argument about maybe there was some confusion in there because this is not a pattern of behavior. R. Kelly has a pattern of behavior that spans over 3 decades. And the federal stuff has nothing to do with court opinion, because when they raided his house, they found child pornography. So it's not even like somebody gave him up, because they told the folks exactly where to look. And he had his own personal collection, which was confiscated, and you know, somebody dropped a dime on him. So that is not going to be, you know, a maybe. We know about Aaliyah. We know he married an underage.
We knew that.
So there's a pattern of behavior that spans out over that. That man is different than the other one. But if you compare an R. Kelly to Bill Cosby, just because it was, we'll call it socially acceptable to drug women and take advantage of them,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't make it right.
Yeah.
So if at all there are 5, 10, 15, or one woman sitting somewhere who felt that she was taken advantage of in that situation, then he need to go.
Mm-hmm.
If you're saying what's right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know when the big thing when you're like, well, there's 30, 40 names saying he did this, that, and the third. And when you pick through all of them, there may be some discrepancies.
Mm-hmm.
But there also may be some truth.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but when you're saying what's legally Bill Cosby should be home based upon what the law is and the way they got him. And but I think that it's important that we stress that it's legally is why he should be home.
Excuse me.
You know, because the deposition he gave freely. And when he talked about, you know, drugging women and all that, he said it freely, he said it openly, and in his interpretation, he said it honestly. So these things took place. It was just almost like when you go to confession at church, like, I'm just getting this off my chest, but you can't do nothing with it. So when he got it off his chest in that deposition, all those things he saw, he believed happened. That's still some behavior that can warrant some jail time.
Now, let me ask you a question.
Okay.
so let me ask you. So, because see, I think, and I don't know, you can answer this, or maybe somebody watching can. If we're talking 30 years,
yeah,
I think that's too long. Now, if we're talking 5 to 10 years, 12, 13, he did this, then to me, any man drugging a woman, like you said, even if it was socially acceptable, I was just saying, I'm sure that's why it happened so much, because it was more socially accepting then. I don't know of too much of that happening now, like in the club atmosphere. I'm not sure.
It does. So I'm a firm believer in history, and that we don't paint the picture of revisionist history. So if you go up until about 20, 25 years ago, super intoxicating a woman, drugging a woman, any of those things was still socially acceptable. Like, even in the 90s, let's remove what happened in, you know, everyone want to say what happened in 1950, 1960, 1970, the 90s, getting a girl drunk to try to do something to her was still socially acceptable amongst men. Let's not act like we were super evolved in 1996. You know, that was still a very common practice. Even into the 2000s, where we had the onset of like GHB and a bunch of date rape drugs, which became much more popular. That was a common practice. And even dudes who they faced charges then, it was still gray area of what to do with them. Because you're saying, well, did she? Yeah, she was okay with the weed. She was okay with the liquor. She just didn't know about this. Okay, well, you know, maybe kind of sort of. And a lot of dudes were sexually assaulting women who went home. So it's not like we're talking about an era that was just 30 years ago. That's what we used to do, but we don't do that anymore. It's still so common that they had to recently change the laws in a lot of states in the last 5 years, that if you have sex with somebody who's intoxicated, that's against the law. Like, it doesn't matter if you're both adults. It doesn't matter if you both went to the bar, if you were both okay with drinking, if you were both cool with going home with one another. If one of you can say, I was not in my right mind, a law was broken. And this is stuff that they put in place in the last 5 years. So this is a culture that has been very prevalent. Like, this is not a new thing. So and for Bill Cosby, if anybody did it to anybody 30 years ago, just because you moved on with your life does not mean the person who you victimized did. And so this idea that, well, that was 25 years ago, everybody should be over it. They're not. It's the way that there are women who are in the States now. The reason why they have relationships the way they do now is because of what happened to them 30 years ago. The way that they parent their sons and their daughters based upon what happened to them 30 years ago. Like, just because the dude or the predator got past it and maybe went on and joined the church, he got saved.
I was just finna say, bro, okay, I feel what you're saying.
Yeah.
Even so, 30 years ago, what takes someone so long to come out? My question would be, what happened? in this day and time that made you say, okay, I want to tell my story. That's why a lot of those women, that's why a lot of it seems kind of fishy to me. And I think if you're a lawyer and you conjure up all these women, and let's say you know that 5 of them is really telling the truth, and 27 of them is lying, and you notice, I think all the shit should be thrown out, because that's like nefarious behavior. How about because you're right. Women do get taken advantage of every day in America. And even today, regardless of what type of date rape drug, because I've been hearing about other things, dudes putting women drink to make them go to sleep and all this shit. That's wrong. Like, you should go to jail for that. Whatever the court system want to do to you, there's no reason to do that. Like in society, especially being a man, as many women as there are, if it's really just about, if you don't know how to talk to a woman, if you haven't figured out how to get to home plate yet, read a book, talk to one of your homeboys. There's too many resources out here for you to take that route. However, I think sometimes women take advantage of this system. I think sometimes women understand that there's no repercussions for a woman who claims a man did something, and then it comes out that he did nothing. She doesn't go to jail. She doesn't get fined. She doesn't get probation. So I think I want to be on the side of women, because women physically are weaker than us. Like, I don't have any daughters, but I can only imagine having a daughter in anticipating how her interactions with the opposite sex is going to be, because for the most part, when you're with a woman, at any time you can try to take advantage of her, and a lot of women won't have the wherewithal to fight you off. So that puts women in a really vulnerable state pretty much every day of their life, right? So I understand that. But when the legal system and women that are up to no good take advantage of these type of things, it sours it for me. That's why I can't look at the R. Kelly situation directly and say, bam, this is what should happen. Even with Bill Cosby, I get to looking at the other factors because of how this system typically treats us. You know what I mean?
I get that. So there are some things that go in behavior where there's patterns of victimized behavior. So typically what happens, if you talk to a woman who was sexually assaulted at 23 and you really talk to her, there's a lot of times you'll find out she was also assaulted at 14 and she was also assaulted at 6. And also assaulted at 3. That once they've been victimized by one of these predators, there's a little something that changes. There's like a little something with the antenna, just changes, and it's something that predators know. And I always liken it to people who've been in the military can be in a crowded environment and spot somebody else who was in the military. People who've been to prison can be in a crowded room and spot somebody else who's been to prison.
True.
You don't have to know. There's just little mannerisms. There's just little there's a posture thing. There's just something. You can't put your finger on and say definitively what it is, but you just know it when you see it. And there's something that happens in behavior when people are victimized, and especially when they're victimized young. So you start finding people who've been preyed upon for years. So the question is, why wouldn't a 26-year-old woman come out and say something when it happened? Well, if she's been assaulted several times up to that point, and depending upon where this thing happened, if she hasn't even come to terms with the other ones that happened, Uncle so-and-so, big brother such and such, then sometimes you're in a victimized state to where you almost accept that this sort of thing happens to you. Like the world, this is just like, and if you live in a bad neighborhood and someone shakes you down for your lunch money, you just have to say it's par for the course. If you're walking back and forth to school every day, I just might get jacked. There are people who get victimized during the point of their life that there's a part of you that just kind of concedes that this happens. And you can be quiet. But it didn't matter if it happened at 22, if it happened at 16, if it happened at 11, all of them need to go to jail. Like, it doesn't mean because you didn't tell on the guy at 12 that you need to let the guy at 16 off. It means every last one of them need to go. And so I think the issue with Cosby is there was so many great, even qualifying the last one they got in, it was past the statute of limitations and they made an exception to even hear her. He was about to age out of all these cases. And the last one they just barely attached him to, I think Andrea something, I think her name was, that was the last one they could catch. And they used her to link backwards to the other ones. So there's a lot of gray area around his case. That's what you talk about legally. Was it legal versus what's right? But I would just look for us in the community. If we're celebrating this as a win, you know, this version's OJ. You know, this is another beat the system. I think it's important to look at, like I said, why he's home. He's not home because his defense team proved beyond a shadow of a doubt he didn't do it. He's just home because a confession he made should have been inadmissible. Mm-hmm. So I think that when we celebrate these things, what are we celebrating? Like,
true. I think that's part of the emotional composition of our community. Like, you have to critically, I always say this, I'm trying my best to get better at this myself. You have to critically think about things. You have to look at things from both sides. You have to take your emotion out of it. Sometimes you have to remove our oppression. Like, you have to go through this whole process if you care about your people, because you can get to a point where, because you research what's been done to us and because you're aware of how we've been treated, it becomes a reaction that it must be the system, or it must be. And just like the Juneteenth thing, I don't knock anyone who celebrates Juneteenth, but to me, what actually happened shouldn't necessarily be celebrated. But I get it. Like, we're always looking for the win. We're painted in such a way in this country, even with the OJ thing. I know people who, from the bottom of their heart, they think he did it. Yeah. But they was happy to see him get off, because you don't see too many of the wins. It's the level of equality is so off-putting that sometimes we celebrate when we shouldn't.
We just a win is a win.
A win is a win. I don't care if we cheated. I don't care how we got there, because they'll also say those same legal loopholes that got him off is the same loopholes that the system will use against us at times. You know what I mean? It could be people who don't even like Bill Cosby, who was just because the headline, like headlines do, won't get into any particulars. It just said he's a free man and gives a little bit of information. But you look at that, oh, he free. Go right to your Twitter or your social media, post it.
Must be innocent.
Free. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, because when we look at like the highest percentage of people who are exonerated from DNA evidence are Black males.
Yes.
Of overturned convictions when they implement DNA evidence, overwhelmingly the largest group are Black men. Most people who are wrongfully convicted, Black men is the highest population. Mm-hmm. And so when we talk about, well, I don't trust the system, or even if I don't even mess with Bill, just like you said, I didn't mess with Orenthal. I'm good on governments. If you didn't mess with Slick Willie from Philly, or you didn't mess with Orenthal James, you can say, and a lot of people believe that OJ got off for the Rodney King thing, is that they had the Rodney King issue, you had the riots in LA, then you get OJ. There's a lot of people who believe that if OJ Simpson was found guilty, LA would have completely burned to the ground. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot of people under the belief of, okay, we just gonna have to wash this one because it's the same police department. Mm-hmm. It's the same LAPD that got that mess with Rodney King is the same LAPD that got OJ. So there are a lot of people just believe we just gonna have to just let it go. Mm-hmm. Just let him off on this one so we can have some kind of peace and rebuild this city. Mm-hmm. But I think for us in our community, kind of the question is, what does that mean for us? What are we looking at? If we're celebrating OJ getting off because we're just like, screw the man because of the Rodney King stuff, at least if we're honest about it, because most of us, we had no ties. Most of us didn't know who Nicole was when she died.
True.
We didn't know nothing. Didn't know nothing about his life that way. OJ wasn't messing with Black folks like that. Mm-hmm. You know, we wasn't, you know what I mean? Like, we wasn't in his business like that. Most of us didn't even know her name until she was dead. Mm-hmm. So to charge her death to the game as a compensation for Rodney King, a lot of us were willing to do. Mm-hmm. With Bill Cosby, if you're saying, okay, I'm just supporting, this is a legal loophole that 30 years it circulates back around, lets a Black man off for all the ones who shouldn't have been convicted. If that's your celebration, then at least let's call it that. But the parade in the streets of Bill didn't do nothing is not accurate.
Correct.
Because Bill himself said he did something.
Yeah, I see exactly what you're saying. That's why I always think just perspective is very important. If you know which direction you're going, just say that. Some people won't look into what actually happened. and kind of get an understanding that, okay, this was like a legal mistake. You know what I mean?
They thought they knew when they got the deposition that the state had said it's not going to be inadmissible. What their belief was that they could link together enough affidavits, enough people to say the same thing to establish an MO that the judge overseeing it would do what the judge did. We have enough information that goes along that creates this story and this narrative that if you say yes to this, we can link him to several other people to try to get justice as a whole. So overlook this one thing and we can get justice for all these people. For whatever reason, judge said, okay. But when it got up to the Supreme Court, they didn't care about none of that mess. The Supreme Court was simply the letter of the law. State agreed to not be able to use it. That's all I need to know. If you wanted to be able to use it later, you should have put some different wording in there, or you shouldn't have given him that option, and you should have did whatever you was going to do in that civil case without his deposition. But as soon as you made that deal and said you cannot prosecute him criminally, I don't care whatever came after that. So the Supreme Court just looked at it. Did you agree to this? Yes. Did you? Yep. Throw it out.
So let me just clarify. So the prosecution knew that they were using information that they shouldn't have been using?
Yes.
Okay. See, so they tried to cheat the man.
What they did is they were like, okay, well, we have him confessing to doing some shady stuff. We got him confessing to saying that he gave, that he drugged women. So he's saying he did it. Now that case has nothing to do with this over here. But what it does is it creates a pattern of behavior. So if we can say this woman's accusing him here, we can get him confessing to do it here, which goes along with the story of these women here. This piece bridges the gap between all these women. So when it comes before the judge, well, he signed it. I know, but you can't look at all these women and all these stories, and this is the only thing that bridges them together. And the judge said okay. And sometimes they do it for this reason. Well, I let it go here, and if they kick it up to the appellate court, to the Supreme Court, then let them deal with it further down the road. But that's what happened. The judge said okay on something that should have been inadmissible. And when his lawyers took it to the Supreme Court, they're like, yeah, you guys, the states of Pennsylvania said this deposition cannot be used for a criminal case. And you used it for one. So anything that came after that, throw it out. And because you made this thing so public, we can't find an impartial jury in the United States of America who has not heard some information about this deposition. So you can't even do a retrial because it was too big of a case. If it was in some small county that nobody knew anything, you may be able to go outside the area and find a new jury. But the whole world knew about this Bill Cosby case. Now,
he can't be retried in any of this. So
not for the stuff that they got him for, because
it will have to be a different set of women.
Yeah, we'll see what it is that deposition is what linked him to the other women.
Got it.
So when you take that out, there's nothing within the statute of limitations that you can connect those women to what he was there for.
Got it.
So, and like I said, now because the case is so huge, you can't retry him because there's nobody who does not know about the details of the Cosby case.
Got it.
So you're not going to find an impartial jury. So at this point, you just got to leave the man alone.
Got it. So in your opinion, because basically he was in jail for almost 3 years illegally.
Yeah.
Should he sue the state of Pennsylvania?
He's got a strong case. He's got a very strong case because the state, the same reason why the Supreme Court kicked it out is the same grounds for why he should not have been in there. It was that you knew this information was inadmissible. And the only loophole to that would be is if his attorney brought it up at the time. So if his attorney didn't bring it up at the time of the court, at the time of the hearing, there may not be no lawsuit there in that case. Say they didn't find it until later, and that's how they got him thrown out. But if it was brought up then yeah, he's got a lawsuit on his hands.
You know what? So I think ultimately the celebration for our people about this particular part of his situation should be the fact that the system tried to do what they do to us a lot of times and railroad us and use things that they shouldn't. And this time it kind of backfired, which is good. Like I'm happy that the brother is home. And now again, I still don't like the time gap thing. Like 30 years, too much can happen within that time frame. Now I understand that like you made a great point. If you get molested at 4, then at 9, then at 12. You have all these other issues that you've been thinking about or things you've been thinking about. So just coming out and mentioning this one or talking about it, it may be hard for some women.
No.
I understand that. But to me, it's still too long of a gap in time. That person could be not just dead now, but that person can be like, people change. Now, of course, you were scarred. And I think what should be done about you being scarred 30 years ago? I think money, maybe, counseling, lifelong counseling, that's free. Maybe the best counselors that the United States has to offer, but criminal charges on someone after that amount of time, I can't say that I agree with that.
The only thing that I have with that, and this, without getting too deep down the rabbit hole, is I think part of it is tied in to the devaluing of women's bodies due to the exploitation of women's bodies.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is that because women are so objectified and super sexualized, and then women are just sexual creatures, they're human beings. Mm-hmm. The idea of saying she had sex with a dude, the argument a lot of times is she probably would have did it anyway if he had money, if he had prestige, because that's usually the argument. What was she doing in his room at 2 a.m? What was she doing in such? And she probably would have did it anyway. But if it was reversed and it was a man who was raping men who were not homosexual, there's no statute of limitation that a man would say at this stage, I got over that.
True.
So if the argument was, so keep the size relative, because when you take even Bill Cosby at that was still 180 pounds and lean. Like, people forget Bill Cosby, when he was a young man, I Spy Bill, track team Bill was fit. And when you put him on these 110, 115, 120 pound women, that's the equivalent. If you're a 185 pound man, that a 240 pound man is coming for you. So would you say that if Dwayne Johnson threw you to the ground and took it 20 years later, you'd still be all right?
No, I don't think so.
You know what I'm saying? Ray Lewis pins you down and does something to you. That's the equivalent. Like that, that's the size variance. So
Ray Lewis pin you down and take that thing, you ain't never gonna forget that.
30 years later, are you over it?
Well, here, but see, wait, you don't think that's a little bit different, because that's man on man. I mean, if come on now, if a woman did it to you, if 30 years ago, you 17 and a 30-year-old woman took advantage of you, I think a man may feel a way about it a little bit, but I don't think I think it's different with women and men. I don't think we see it as being violated.
That's the valuing part, is because the premise is that she's a woman and he's a man, and this is an act that she probably would have participated in. Mm-hmm. So the idea of a man inserting himself in a woman is an act that she probably would have done on her own. The idea of a man inserting a man who's not homosexual, that's not something he would want to receive. But if you look at it the same way he wouldn't want to receive it is the same way she wouldn't want to receive it, then there'd be the connection of it doesn't matter how much time goes by.
That makes sense.
You know what I'm saying? I'm saying like Joey Porter gives you some drink. LeBron slips you some Spanish fly, and he take it to the rack on you. Then every day you're seeing him on TV, and every day you're seeing he's got movies coming out, and he's got shoe deals, and everybody's telling you how great he is. Mm-hmm. But that's not your experience with him. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, and that's when I think that's why that statute of limitations thing does not hold up, in my opinion, because if LeBron took it from you at 22, you could be 52 and you still gonna have problems. Mm-hmm. That's not that you're not just gonna take that on the chin and just happens. Like, you're gonna be messed with forever.
Yeah.
And I don't think we value women that way, like we would value ourselves if it was us. We got dudes coming from prison all the time and never write again. Mm-hmm. True. Over some stuff that they don't talk about what happened to them.
True. So I think fathers, especially in our community, because you're right, I don't think anybody should take advantage of women. Sometime a man will look at a woman how she's dressed and say, well, why you dressed like that, right? If you didn't want this, why are you giving off? But in the defense of men, like for all the men who got daughters, I would definitely say that you have to be very careful with your sexuality. Like you can't use it for good and then when some shit pop off, act like you a victim. Because I know a lot of women who understand how this dynamic works. So they're going to use their body. They're going to use how they look. They're going to use sexual prowess. They're going to use sexual innuendos. They're going to use all of this shit to get things from men. So sometimes you opening up the door for everything to happen. If you're using your sexuality to get stuff out of men, or if you're using your sexuality to move forward in America because you know how it works, then while doing this, you get someone who takes advantage of you. I think that's par for the course at that point. Now, this isn't all women. All women, just because you put on something that looks nice, don't mean you want some negative attention.
There's women who get raped in parkas and turtlenecks. There's women who are wearing Uggs with baggy jeans, with parkas on, with a beanie, with no makeup, with nothing, who are getting sexually assaulted. Yeah. I know what you're saying. Like if you doing this, then you may have a higher probability for that.
Yes.
But I look at okay, so we do all the mentorship programs and stuff for young boys. The argument is that you need to get confirmation. Like you need to be clear. The onus is not going to be on her if this thing goes sideways. So like to men, the onus is going to be on you if you didn't get clarification. So this whole idea of, well, she was dressed like this, that just meant no, it didn't. But she was flirting this. She was acting like this. She was talking all this badness on the phone, talk about she was trying to get her Cardi, on her thought stuff, on her this, that, and she was going to do. Okay. And if at any given time she said, no, take me home, let me out, I want to leave.
Of course.
None of that mess that came before it matters. So I know that there are situations that can be more problematic. I should be able to walk with wearing see-through pants with every dollar I own in every last one of my pockets. Every piece of jewelry I own on every finger, every bracelet, every necklace. I should be able to walk with keys to my Ferrari dangling on my finger through the worst side of town and nobody rob me. Because what's mine is mine and robbery is wrong. I should be able to.
Yes.
I should. Because no one has the right to rob me or take what's mine. So I get that. But I also know if I do that, I have raised the probability that somebody's going to rob me. So I understand what you're saying with women. You should be able to wear whatever you want. You should be able to flirt to whatever extent you feel comfortable with. You should be able to talk all the nastiest Little Kim, Nicki Minaj, Trina, Cardi B, Meg Thee Stallion talk you want to talk. And if you say, nah, I'm good, that should be the end of the conversation. You should. But there are some environments and some individuals that don't respect that should. Because
like you were saying about a woman going up to a hotel room at 2:00 in the morning. Yeah. Of course, you can't expect her to have sex. Like you can't say you came up here now.
It's guaranteed. Yeah.
But if I got a daughter, I'm a teacher and I'm going to ask her, right? Because you have to, as a woman, I think it's your responsibility to kind of get an idea of how men think. I'm going to ask my daughter, what the hell was you doing up there at 2:00 if you know you wasn't going? Because most men think that way. So like you were saying, she should be able to do that. And she can. There will be dudes she do that to. And at 3:30, she say, I'm out of here. And he'd be like, all right, bounce. I mean, I ain't tripping. But you raise the probability when you put yourself in a situation like that. You know what I mean? So I think women can learn from because like you were saying, young men can learn that make sure you get the okay. Yeah. Like make sure you read in the room. Make sure you read in the body language to make sure that this woman is okay. Make sure you know how to talk and you're confident so you don't feel like you got to take advantage of a woman. You know what I mean? Yeah. But for little girls, it's important that you know what comes with certain things, right? And not to get into this cycle, because I know women and have seen women who basically eat off of the land. Like a job ain't really necessary. Earning for myself ain't really necessary, because they understand the dynamics in America that a beautiful woman, for the most part, will get taken care of by a man. Yeah. For the most part. So they play into that, and you know what I mean? And that can be their life where they're not really focusing on things they need to focus on. So if we're talking to young women, you got to like protect your essence and make sure you're giving off the right vibe, because even if you nice and not sexual, like you said, and have on the turtleneck and have on baggy pants, there still may be men that treat you a certain way or talk to you a certain way. But I have seen that, and again, it's not necessarily a right thing that men do this, but the more sexually available a woman looks physically, sometimes can determine how men talk to her and the environment that she's in. You know what I mean?
There is definitely something to be said. And of course, this is not all men, but there is definitely a percentage who will sway the way they approach a woman. If you see a bunch of sisters dressed like they just came from mosque, hands completely covered, hair covered, they're all walking in rank and tone, like, and they look like, some Muslim sisters who just look like they just finished listening to the minister. Mm-hmm. Them ain't the ones that you come talking crazy to, because nothing about them says they're going to receive or reciprocate what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. But if you saw a bunch of them walking around with, skirts hitting them at the hip and their breasts pushed up to their chin, there's going to be a higher level of disrespect.
Yes,
doesn't mean it's right, but it happens. Mm-hmm. But I think because I think also something too, as we just talking about this stuff, is that there are dudes who talk and behave themselves out of an opportunity for sex. And what I mean by that is she drove over there with the intention of doing something at 2. He got to talking and behaved himself out of the opportunity by 2:30. Mm-hmm. So if the question is, what were you doing there at 2? I know I was going to give him some till he opened his mouth. But then when he got the talk, I'm like, nah, let me up out of here. Mm-hmm. And he's not entitled to her, even though that might have been her original reason she showed up.
Yeah.
And so that's why I don't just put it on, well, what was she wearing? What did she show up to? She could have full-fledged showed up with the full intention of just doing the most. Mm-hmm. But if at any given time she says, nah, son, like, you talk too much. Like I was already here. All you had to do was just play your position and you be fine.
Be quiet.
Yeah, you got on some extra
relax,
stuff. Yeah, you got chicks calling while I'm here. You got your place is nasty. You got the floor is sticky, dishes everywhere. Mm-hmm. Nah, I can't. I don't feel comfortable. I'm out. And now she's leaving.
Yeah.
That don't mean that you get the pass to go ahead and say, well, she came up here. So that's why I put the onus on. I'm a grown man now and I still get confirmation from women. You sure? Like just, lot to lose in these streets. Let me just go ahead. Like that's
lot to lose in these streets. I just got to make sure.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Get your confirmation on. But I think that for us as a community, this is what I say, it starts to look telling of what is it we're celebrating and what is it that we value? Mm-hmm. Do we care more that, Mr. Puddin' Pop, Slick Willie from Philly, because we like what he did for a living, is home and he beat the system? Or is there anything for those women? And that's why I preface him with R. Kelly, because we're doing all this. I saw people posted pictures of R. Kelly being released. It was old pictures when he was originally arrested. And all through social media, all these people were cheering because they thought it was new. They thought it just happened. Mm. Like there's a lot of people who think R. Kelly should be home right now. Mm-hmm. Do we value somebody's talent over all these people who have been victimized by him?
True. And I'm one, I guess I will be guilty of a little bit of that, because on my playlist right now,
you still playing Kales?
When R. Kelly pop up, man, listen, man. This is the greatest R&B singer of my time.
Yeah.
He is a sick man. He didn't kill nobody. He didn't molest a set. The details about all of this matters to me. He manipulated young girls. They were too young to maybe understand what was going on. Yeah. This makes it wrong. Yeah. This means he should go to jail, but jail for life, throw him away. I'm sorry. I don't feel that strongly about that situation now. And I tell everybody all the time, jokingly, when we listen to hip hop artists,
watch if we joking about this subject, but go ahead.
When we listen to hip hop artists,
yeah,
and I'm gonna say it, I don't care. When we listen to hip hop artists who talk about shoot 'em up, bang bang, right? Okay. Talk about shoot 'em up, bang bang. when he do the real shoot 'em up, bang, bang in the street, and I see the case posted on YouTube or I see the news article, I'd be like, all right, 1 + 1 = 2. R. Kelly kind of been telling us what he into. That's why I say all that to say, if certain songs come on, I can't listen to it. You know what I mean?
Seems like you're ready.
Certain songs, it's difficult for me to get it out my mind.
Yeah,
what I know he's talking about. You know what I mean? So he was telling us what in that. See, that's another thing about his situation. Just before we wrap everything up here, if we knew about all of this 20 years ago, what happened? Why wasn't he prosecuted 20 years ago? We hearing about him living with these young girls this entire time.
Yeah.
There isn't one time of his career where we didn't hear about these type of things happening.
Yeah.
Now, why the public outrage? I don't like how it feels like the people who run society can almost push a button at times and things get activated. Once the Surviving R. Kelly thing dropped, which I didn't watch, you know what I mean? Because again, if he's holding you hostage with a gun and he's beating you and he's violent, then yes, you had to survive R. Kelly. But if you was willingly going back to his house, if you was willingly living with 3 or 4 people or 3 or 4 women because of your mental state and where you are in your life, I don't really want to see that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, with him, the fact that if you're talking about a bunch of 25-year-old women, that's a woman who made poor choices in her mate. You know, she picked a dude who was controlling, who was, you know, who wasn't abusing them. It was just the stuff he was doing with these girls. They weren't old enough for him to be doing it with them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, all the other sexual stuff they was into, that was them 2 adults, like for the grown women. But when you're talking about these minors, whomever they were before him, that person never grew up. So it's almost like you're on a road, and when something like that happens to you, that type of abuse, the road forks.
Mm-hmm.
You can't never get back to the road you were originally on. So it doesn't mean that you can't get in the same direction. You can't still keep going east or a neighboring town, but whatever road you were on before that abuse happened, you can't undo it.
That makes sense.
So these women that were 14, 15, 16, and we can't count all the countless ones he paid off for years.
Yeah.
I mean, even the girl in the videotape, she's like, no, that wasn't me. But everybody who knew her knew that's her. She took the money.
Uh-huh.
You know, so she's like, no, that wasn't me. Mm-hmm. R. Kelly sponsored a lot of girls going to college.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact is that, so if it's the minors, you know, it's all these kids who are not in a position to make the decision on, I should have left. I should have did this. I should have did that. And I think when you do that type of damage to a human being, these women that are now in their 30s, 40s, you see them. They're shook. Like there is something that, like I said, that's why I said we don't value women's bodies that way, because we believe it's an act that they would perform anyway under different circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not necessarily true.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so there's women who've dated men all the time and never slept with them. Mm-hmm. Women who've been celibate for long stretches of time. That's just not something they were just necessarily doing because they were women. But like I said, if R. Kelly was doing this to young boys, and some 16-year-old said that you know, R. Kelly had him doing A, B, and C to get on the Chocolate Factory. You know what I'm saying? Like he was doing it, and you'd be like, man, like this is,
yeah, you
know, this kid's probably gonna be messed up forever.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this kid's probably, and these women have problems that they deal with forever. And I just look at, for us as a community, I think this is more of a snapshot of how we overlook Bill like we overlook Uncle Bill. We overlook R. Kelly like we overlook Cousin Robert. That Cousin Robert that didn't touch half the girls in the family, now he just got a back bedroom at grandma's house. But we just gonna overlook what he did from 86 to 94.
Mm-hmm.
We just gonna overlook what Uncle Bill did for 2 generations of women in the family because now he's old. Mm-hmm. And just say, well, he's just back there, and he's just not gonna be around the family. We just ain't gonna mess with him. Mm-hmm. And I think that is an example of what we do within our community. And that's why I think that this is a bigger problem than a lot of us, specifically men in our community, actually look at.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we got cousin Sylvester in the family, and to the men in the family, we still cool with him.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, half the women in the family are terrified or hate him.
Mm-hmm. I was just talking to somebody in my family about that, about how we normalize abuse, and the girl who was abused when she was 7 or 8 years old, she still got to see Uncle Charles 20 years down the line. He's still around. And I've known girls who came forth to their grandma or told their mama, and their mama tell them, my brother wouldn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Or he was just drunk that night. Little girl, you don't know what you're talking about.
You was fast.
You know what I mean?
You was sitting on folks' lap. You was dressed a certain way.
You had on, yes. So I think it's a good thing you said that, because I definitely think that is a factor of our psyche when we look at these situations. But for me personally, yeah, I'm looking at that as well as how untrustworthy this system is. So whenever I see them dealing with us in this manner, it's so many things to unpack, because I don't know what their agenda is. I never want to excuse somebody for doing wrong, for doing something that's wrong. Like you said, a young girl who can't make the decision. You're speaking a lot about how these type of events stick with them for the rest of their life. I can only imagine. So he needs to be punished, right? Like, there's no doubt, him and Bill Cosby, if everything Bill Cosby did, there needs to be a punishing mechanism. But how you go about doing it, who's included with it, I think all of those things need to be handled delicately, because when I'm watching it again, I'm not sure where to separate, okay, this is exactly what he done, from this system wanting to make an example out of him. And sometimes I'm just tired of needing to separate both, when it should just be straight up and down. You know what I mean? Yeah. But to understand what we've had to go through in this country, it's not that simple. But it's important for us to look at all the details, make a decision for yourself. I think with social media and just how the internet operates today, everybody is on some sort of bandwagon to a degree. Yeah. If somebody you like don't like a particular celebrity or don't like a particular person, then you saying fuck that person,
you don't like him,
having a problem. I think all that needs to stop. Like us right now, critically talking about Bill Cosby, I think when things happen in the public, it's okay for you to speak on them. If you want to add perspective or add your opinion, go right ahead. But what I'm learning, and what I'm never going to do again on any of these platforms, is create a environment where I'm being the judge and jury for a particular person.
Yeah.
Or I'm slandering somebody. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. Because sometimes I battle with that. I mean, after we're done with this broadcast, this will be the next episode of my show. How I title the show is always important to me, because
what's the narrative? What is the belief of the conversation? I think that when we look at, like I said, so rather than saying which is, so I know you time wise, and saying, is this the system or is this something that the person's doing? Whenever I see things that pop up with somebody getting arrested for this or indicted on that, is this a direct correlation to what I see as a prevalent problem within the community? Okay, yay, nay, like this lets me know how much more of this system is it dealing with some. So is the molestation and abuse of our women in the community, is that prevalent? Yes, it is an alarming number of how many Black women have been sexually assaulted before they turn 18. Like, ridiculous. And so, put it this way, statistically, a Black woman is more likely to have been sexually assaulted than knows how to read by the time she's 18.
Damn, that's alarming.
Yeah,
to say the least. Yeah.
Yeah. So the number is astronomical. So to say that, well, this man is being accused of this, and well, that's the system, that's the man. No, we really have a deep-rooted problem with sexual abuse that goes against our young girls. Mm-hmm. So I don't jump to the system, because this is something that's prevalent. If you said, well, man, these Black dudes are all getting arrested for running and operating meth labs. Okay, that's not something we do. So if all of a sudden all these Black dudes all of a sudden start getting popped for these meth labs that are all run and operated by Black people across the country, that to me smells set up, because that is not something we consistently or statistically do. Mm. That's where I'm like, okay, something going on here. How many brothers you know running a meth lab? You know what I mean? Like, as soon as they try to make the first batch, they blowing the block up. Like, just like, that's just not something we do. So that would be something that would seem fishy to me. But knowing that how our women get abused in our community is such a high number, I don't jump to this is the system trying to get the dude or try. No, we have a really deep problem with this. So let me start looking at, like, I'm gonna hear them out. Like, I'm not just jumping to, conspiracy or this, that, and the third. What's pattern of behavior? And these two men, we're talking about a pattern that existed over decades.
True. Very
like
true.
I said, Mike Tyson, Kobe Bryant, Tupac, one-offs. That we can get into the debate on what we think those individual incidences were.
Mm-hmm.
But when you tell me, when I know you did this, Bill Cosby confessed to drugging women. R. Kelly had to get annulled because he married a minor and fraudulently put some paperwork in to marry Aaliyah. So I already know you do this.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's just a question of how many times. I know this is in you. So I'm not jumping to conspiracy because you've already showed me this is something you're capable of. And I think within our community, we've got cousin Sylvester and Uncle Bill who have shown the family who he is, and he still gets to come around. He still gets to be at grandma's house. He still has access to children. He still keep, you'll hear your mom was abused by somebody, and so was your aunt, but then so was your sister. You're like, how has this dude been around for 30 years, touching 2-3 generations of a family, and he's still up in here? Because we do not value the women in our community the way that we should.
Good point. Well, this has been a great episode, man. I think critically talking about how all of these things affects us is something we should all do, something we should all partake in. Never to bash anyone, never to look at any of our brothers and completely bash them, but you got to call a spade a spade. If anybody's out here doing anything incorrectly, we need to call them to the table. Sometimes we get on a mission to prove that the system and some of the white participants don't mean us any good. No. And that's fine. But some people in our community don't mean us any good either. Yeah. Some forms of trauma we've been dealing with forever. And instead of getting counseling or going to sit down and talk to somebody, we just normalize too many of the wrong things. We're strong. And I think sometimes that backfires because we internalize things and they come out the wrong way. You know what I mean? So talking about Bill Cosby, talking about OJ, talking about R. Kelly, all of these brothers, sometimes their actions are symptoms of bigger things, like Jermaine is saying. So if there's symptoms of bigger things, we have to address that. But I always think at the same time, being untrustworthy of the United States and how they operate, you got to learn how to separate the two, because sometimes, we be on some bullshit as men. And like Jermaine was saying, how men treat women in general now, because we can go to black, like our community, but like how the white man had been treating his woman, she's had a problem with him for centuries. I mean, just in general, how men treat women, that always has to be checked. So if you got sons, if you got young dudes around you, teaching them to respect women, teaching them to be comfortable with who they are, teaching them, like most men, in my opinion, most men don't know how to talk to women. Just flat out. Most men do not know how to talk to a woman that they're interested in, a friend or something, maybe, but a woman that they're interested in and they want to be intimate with, or they want to further things along. Certain men just don't know what to say. They can be great at certain areas of their life, but they clam up around women. As a father, as a cousin, as an older person who's seeing that, try to talk to him. Try to make sure he's confident. Try to make sure he understands that the ratio to men and women is pretty high. I mean, the ratio to women and men is pretty high. Just relax. Be yourself. Yeah. Be confident. You should be fine, right? But if you see a young dude who's a basket case, who can't talk to women and is trying to use social media in a particular way to talk to women, and he's still not getting the response he wants, ultimately, this antisocial type of kid can grow up to be a man that violates women and do different things. So tap into young people around you who you know or you see maybe kind of awkward when it comes to girls, or maybe kind of awkward different areas of his life. Help him out. You know what I mean? Because I think if we had some of these young dudes who were taught differently by men, because sometimes we have men who have power,
Yeah.
That's a whole nother conversation. The men who are powerful and because of that feel they can do certain things, that's a different conversation. But I just know a lot of men who have trouble talking.
They're actually the smaller number.
Right.
I think and Tony, you saying, I know time was with me. I'm always long-winded. Is that a lot of this stuff is because we don't love on the young men in our community. And when you grow up feeling insecure, you don't feel validated, you don't feel heard, you don't feel like you're in control of your life or the things around you, you find yourself trying to get that control somewhere. And that can lead to abusive behavior, that can lead to substance abuse and depression. Like, the fact is that you constantly feel disregarded, disrespected, and dismissed. And a big thing that, and I close out this and get it, there's something to remember, especially dealing with our young people. The opposite of love is not hate. We sit there and think that because we're not mean to them, or we're not rude to them, or we don't disrespect them, that we should be fine. The opposite of love isn't hate. The opposite of love is indifference. When you don't care one way or the other, that's the opposite of love. So when we're indifferent to all of these young people in the community, when we're indifferent to the way that the women are in our community are treated, we're indifferent to when we hear about these atrocities and these trauma things that are happening, that's the opposite of love. So when you don't care about how these young people are growing up, you don't care what's happening to these women, that's when that lets you know you do not have love for the people around you. You do not have love for your community. You are indifferent, and that is the opposite of love.
Definitely. Well, we're going to end on that point. Good stuff. My brother, Jermaine Morris, glad to have you on the show. Again, this is the Melanated Convo podcast. Digital listeners, visual listeners, like, subscribe, keep in tune with what we're doing. Jermaine will be on my show more so we can chop up good game about important conversations. Don't forget to subscribe to Melanated Fathers TV YouTube page. Again, this has been another episode of the Melanated Convo podcast. We out.
Hey.